I'll introduce myself. My name's Lauren Swain, and I'm the program director for PSR Colorado Physicians for Social Responsibilities, Colorado chapter. And it's been a pleasure to serve this organization in the 2026 legislative session. In spite of the difficulties that we all experienced in the session, it was a very challenging time. We had a number of issues regarding energy, the intersection of energy, climate, and health. And that's where we focused our action. And we also had, for the very first time, two wonderful lobbyists, Lacey Hayes and Bailey Kramer. And we cannot thank them enough for the amazing work that they did for us in this session.
It's been an honor to represent PSR Colorado at the legislature this last legislative session. And as Bailey is trying to get into this meeting, Laura and I wrote you a little note. Oh, there she is. She will kick us off to kind of walk everyone through the general process of how legislation is made in Colorado. And oh, since she's here, I will introduce her. Hi, Bailey. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you so much for your patience. Like Lacey said, this just a touch of chaos is always how this seems to go. So, good introduction to this process for sure. My name is Bailey. As Lacey said, I'm one of the contract lobbyists for PSR. We love our jobs. We love what we do, and so we're really excited to share with you all today. Just a taste of what it's like to be in the building. You can ask Lauren and Rachel and anyone who's been in there that it's definitely it's a lot to learn. It's a lot more complicated than a lot of people think, but we're really excited to share with you. We're really passionate about this, so thanks for having us. So a little first about the Colorado legislature. We are unique. All states do things completely differently. And so we do things in a way that our Constitution requires. So each state has different regulations. Ours requires us to have 120 consecutive days of session. Per year, every calendar year. So some states require, for example, 60 days or 90 days. Some of them are biannual, so every other year. Ours is 120 consecutive days every single year. Now, interestingly enough, this only changed or the only time that this was ever different was one time during COVID. That was the only time that we've ever approved non-consecutive days. So we went in for a little bit, gavelled in, worked, gavelled out, and then went back in the summertime. An interesting factoid about that is that the Colorado State Capitol does not have air conditioning because January session runs from January to May. So typically during the winter time, it's cool out. So during COVID, when we had to go back during the summertime, when we broke those 120 consecutive days, it was a little toasty in there. That was rough. So fingers crossed, we get to keep our January to May 120 consecutive days forever after that. It was too hot. We run, so those 120 days always start in January. We start the second Wednesday of January and we go until the second Wednesday of May. It always seems to work out. I do this job. I'm not a mathematician, so I don't know how, but the second Wednesday in January and the second Wednesday in May, and it's 120 days. There are 100 members, so both chambers, the House and the Senate, both make up 100 members. And this is why speaking to your legislator, this is why what Lacey and I do is so important, is because there are 100 legislators. Every single one of them is voting on all of the 700 or 800 bills that come out every session. Every single one of them is voting on every single one of those bills multiple times. And those bills cover a huge variety of topics: energy, animal welfare, appraiser issues, libraries, natural resources, all kinds of issues that you can imagine, healthcare, everything. And not all 100 legislators can be experts on everything. It's not possible. But they're still all voting on these bills, on whether they pass, whether they fail. And so it's really important that we educate them on how this affects the industries in their constituencies. So super, super, super important. Um, as we mentioned, there are two chambers. There is the House and there is the Senate. So both of those are housed in the state capitol. There are 65 members in the House and there are 35 members in the Senate. The House members, so the representatives, are elected every 2 years and they have 4 terms. And the senators are elected every 4 years and they have 2 terms. So they're a little bit different. The House, and they also function a little bit differently. The House often has a little bit more kind of shenanigans. There's more debate. They're a little bit more loosey-goosey than they are in the Senate. The Senate is also known as the like upper chamber. They're much more strict. They're much more serious. They have a lot more kind of regulation going on than in the House. So they function in similar ways, but they have definitely different energy in both of them. Another fun fact is that the House and the Senate are both color coordinated. So when you go into the building, you can tell, which is which based on the color. So the sergeants at arms that really run the building, honestly, we love our sergeants at arms. They will wear color coordinating blazers that determine which chamber they attend. So the House is green. And even when you go and you look onto the House floor, the carpet is green, it's all green, and the Senate is red. So the Senate sergeants at arms are wearing red blazers, and that's how you can tell the two apart. Interestingly enough, when we talk about the right or the left, the Democrats sit on the left, the Republicans sit on the right. One interesting fact, and another interesting fact about our state capitol is that they're flipped based on which chamber you're in. So in the House, the Democrats are sitting to the left based on the Speaker of the House, who sits at the very front of the floor. The Democrats are on her left and the Republicans are on her right. In the Senate, it's the opposite, and the Democrats are sitting on the left based on looking in, and the Republicans are on the right based on looking into the floor from the lobby. So that's really interesting. And when you say across the aisle, we work across the aisle, there is a literal aisle that separates the two in both chambers, which I always think is really interesting. So when you go in there, you can see the actual aisle between the left and the right that people reference when we say work across the aisle. Just as some interesting fun facts about our Capitol and some of the lingo that you hear. Oops, sorry. I accidentally clicked away too early. So our magic numbers are 33, 18, and 1. So these are kind of the big votes that you need in order to pass a bill. So in the House, majority rules, you need 33 on the floor. If you can get 33 on the floor, your bill is passed, you're good to go. You just need 33. In the Senate, it's 18. And then of course, that magic one is the governor. So you have to get it past, the one at the very end there. But those are our 3 magic numbers. Okay, let's see if I can get this to move. Okay, next we're going to go into a little bit about how a bill becomes a law. I'm sure you have all heard the Schoolhouse Rock, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. Oh boy, do we wish it were that simple, let me tell you. It would make our lives a lot easier, and I guess when we're fighting a bill, I guess a lot worse in some ways. But it certainly would make passing a bill a lot easier if it were so simple. So I'm going to go into a little bit of what it takes. I'm going to give you a little bit of a boiled down version. About every step of the way that I'm going to describe, there are little rules, loopholes. There are, there are lots of different things that we can do to either ensure that a bill comes back to life or dies when it passed. There are all kinds of things that we can do that make this so much more complicated that I won't mention, but just know that even though it's going to sound really complicated, it's even more complicated than that. Because there are always there are always little things that we can do, little Hail Marys that we can do every step of the way. And I'll share some of them with you, the more common ones. Okay, so first, when you see a bill, typically you see it online or you already see, the bill has come out and, you know, you're already through the process a little bit of the way. So we're going to back up a little bit, and first talk about what it takes to even get a bill up off of the ground. In order for a bill to come forward, a legislator has to take the bill on. And so how is it decided which bills will be run? And each legislator is allowed 5 bills to run each year. So this is called their top five. And these five, they're kind of guaranteed a spot. Now, and we'll get into this a little bit later, it's not guaranteed that their top 5 bills will be heard. If there's something, wonky with one of them, it's not a guarantee that they'll be heard, but they have 5 slots. So if there's one that's a little wonky, another one can take its place. They will have 5 that they can introduce. So you may have heard me say that we have, 700 or 800 bills that we pass each year. Well, if there's only 100 legislators, that would be 500 bills, right? You would think, again, this is always so wonky, leadership can and does allow what are called late bills every year. So each legislator has a top 5. When you're a lobbyist like us, you want to get your bill in a top 5 because that's a guarantee, essentially, that your bill is going to get introduced. However, after their top 5, legislators can pick late bills to run, and if those are approved, they can run those also. So that is where those excess numbers come from. And every year they say they're going to control late bills and not going to let late bills run. And every year they let late bills run. So we see a lot of those. There are a few different ways that legislators pick and decide to run a bill, which topics are interested in. Sometimes a constituent, so one of you all could go to your legislator and say, hey, this is something that has been really a problem in our district. Here is a coalition of folks that are really concerned about this. Here is a proposed solution. This is what we'd like to do. Can you help? And sometimes the legislators will take that project on. We see that quite a bit. Sometimes they have a personal interest in an issue or some sort of expertise in that space. And they know that this is something that they are interested in running a bill for their top 5, and they'll go about it that way. Sometimes a department will take on a bill. Like the CPW, Parks and Wildlife, Natural Resources, those types of things, will take bill concepts to legislators and say, hey, we're looking to run this bill to solve these problems with the department, and they'll run a bill that way. But I would say most common, what you'll see are lobbyists like Lacey and I who represent groups like PSR, and we come to the legislator and say, hey, this is something that we've been looking at. This is a serious issue. Are you interested in running this? Will you run this with us? We kind of create a coalition and we help them shepherd the bill through the process. So there are a couple different ways, but I would say that is definitely the most common. So once you have a bill concept, you need to find a sponsor that will take the bill into their top 5 or agree to run a late bill, but top 5 is always best. In order to get a bill introduced, you need to have at least one sponsor. So if you can find a representative in the House who wants to run your policy, you can get it introduced and just get it introduced in the House with that one sponsor. However, in order for a bill to be passed completely through the process, you need at very minimum one House representative sponsor and one Senate sponsor. With that being said, It's always best we try to get a fully stacked deck when they're introduced. So there's your first prime sponsor. So that is your one representative and your one senator that you need. Then you can get co-prime sponsors. So that's kind of a secondary prime sponsor. You want to find one in the House, one in the Senate. That's a good chance to try and get a bipartisan bill if possible. So you get a Democrat or Republican. That's getting harder and harder these days. But a lot of times people love to see prime, co-prime, be bipartisan, in at least one chamber if possible. So that is your first prime and your co-prime. We also have co-sponsors. That comes a little bit later, unless you're running a bill that is very much a statement bill. Even if you know it's going to die, a lot of times people try to stack a bunch of co-sponsors onto the bill so you can see a bunch of names. And those are just folks who support the bill, but they're not necessarily running the bill themselves. So your main sponsors are your first prime and your co-prime sponsors. Once you get sponsors all sorted out, again, at least one, they will submit it as one of their top five, and you're submitted to drafting. Once you are assigned a OLLS drafter, an Office of Legislative Legal Services drafter, they will help you draft the bill. Drafters, Lacey and I insist and really believe that drafters are the hardest working people in that building, truly. You would not believe the amount of work that they go through. Oftentimes when drafting, we kind of give them a concept of what we want and they put it into legalese. We say, hey, we want to make it so that someone can't do XYZ or someone has to do XYZ. And they say, perfect. And, a couple days later, you get this beautiful document that is like very official and sounds beautiful, that the drafter went ahead and figured out for you. And a lot of times they'll answer questions about, hey, can we do this? We had a question at one point about, can you require, people go through a certain website in order to access this document? And the answer to that was no. So the drafters are a wealth of information in that regard as well. Knowing what you can and can't put into law is really, really helpful. So once you get the drafting sorted out, you often go through multiple iterations. You'll go through multiple iterations of the bill. Then you go on to stakeholding. So stakeholding is arguably the most important part of the entire process. Often we really like to do this before introduction. Sometimes things get wonky and we have to do it after, but we like to do this November, December, beginning of January if we can. Sorry, of course my dogs are going to start playing in the background.
I don't hear them.
Oh, perfect. Okay, perfect. So stakeholding, you get all of your groups together, opposition and proponent. Sorry, hold on one second. No, it's like they only start doing this when I have things to do. Okay.
Only hear it a little tiny bit. No problem.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so stakeholding is really important. If you don't stakehold, they can call process foul on you. It's a whole mess. You want to stakehold with your people. Okay, once all of that is done, your bill is ready to be introduced. So just a little work to get to where we all see a bill typically introduced. Okay, so if the speaker is happy with your bill, she can hold bills hostage. But if she's happy with your bill, she will introduce your bill on the first or after the first day of session, and the bill will receive a bill number. The bill number structure gives us information on what the bill is. Any House bill is labeled HB and then the last two digits of the year. So HB 26, if it's a House bill, it'll have the number will be 4 digits. If it's a Senate bill, the number will be 3 digits. So just by looking at a bill number, it gives us a lot of information about when it was run and if it's a House or a Senate bill. The bill, when it's introduced, will also be assigned to a committee of reference. And it can go to just one committee of reference or it can go to many. There are and that which committee it goes to depends on the topic of the bill. If there are any reporting requirements to the department, things like that. Some include transportation and energy, agriculture, water and natural resources, education, energy and environment. So it will be assigned to a very beginning first committee of reference, and it may go to multiple. The committee process, so it's first reading. The committee process is the only time, and the only time for public to give input on a bill.
I have a quick question, Bailey. Do the committees change every year, and why and how do they change?
So the actual committees, like transportation and energy, ag, all of those stay the same. Those are always the same year in, year
I mean
out.
the members of.
But yes, yeah, the members can change and they can stay the same. Members oftentimes will say what their interest is or what their expertise is in, and they will so they can change each year. So we usually find that out. Sometimes there's some shuffling in the beginning, but yeah, they can change every year or they can stay the same.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's as everything, it's kind of it depends. It's a fun surprise for us every year. Um, so the only committee, apart from committee of reference, that a bill must go through under certain circumstances is appropriations. Now, every bill technically gets a fiscal note, but not every bill has a number fiscal note. So they get a bill, they all get a fiscal note, but they may have a $0 fiscal note. So if there is a substantive fiscal note, it has to go to appropriations. And that is the committee that decides, are we going to give this money to whatever the bill is asking for or not? Uh,
Bailey, can I ask a quick question?
sure.
What is it possible to put in a fiscal note how much money will be saved?
Yes. So there are also negative fiscal notes. Yeah. So and that's a tool that a lot of people use. So there are totally negative fiscal notes, and they balance out at the end. So yeah. But if there is a number, it has to go to appropriations. Um, okay, I'm gonna try to speed up a little bit because I can yap all day and I see it's already 5:30. So committees are the most kind of common and appropriate time for amendments to be put onto bills. Typically, the stakeholding has been done, the lobbying has been done, a lot of work has been done between introduction and your committee hearing. And so by then you have an idea of what changes need to be made, and you can introduce amendments during the committee hearing. The sponsor or committee members can introduce amendments. And the committee will vote first on the amendment, and if it will be passed or not on the bill, and then the entire committee will vote on the bill itself. If the bill dies in committee, it's done. It doesn't matter if it's its first committee, doesn't matter if it's its, you know, fifth committee. If it dies in any committee, it is completely done. And the theme you will see here is, apart from a very few instances, if it dies at any point, it's done for the session. And if it doesn't, it moves on. Okay, so if the bill passes committee, you're moving on to second reading, which is, I think, the most interesting part of the process. Okay, so the second reading
Oh,
is
just a
also
second. Can you, for people who want to testify, the only time they can do that is in the committee of reference most of the time.
most of the time, yes.
Okay.
So, yeah. So if you want to testify, you need to look online and see where the bill is going and when it's going to its first committee, and that's where most the bulk of the testimony is going to come from. Yeah, that's the only time. Committee time is the only time that the public has input, and public input on a bill. So really important.
And I'll piggyback on that real quick, Bailey. Appropriations Committee typically doesn't take public testimony, but we have seen bills that are solely, they go right to appropriations. They don't have any other committees of reference. And at that time, they do take public testimony. And the calendar will reflect that. It'll say public testimony. But it's very rare for that committee to have anybody, coming up to the mic and speaking their piece on that bill.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so once you have passed committee, go on to second reading. This is also known as the committee of the whole. Of course, we call it the cow. Um, and that is both, I mean, that happens in both the Senate and the House. This is the moment where the floor resolves himself into the committee of the whole, which is exactly what it sounds like. All of the members become one large committee. The speaker or whoever's in the chair is the chairman or woman. And the entire floor are the committee members, the committee of the whole. So this is the moment where the members get to debate the bill. So this is their chance to really, really get out and debate their issues, talk about how great it is, talk about how terrible it is, and they can bring forward amendments at this time. So members, any member, sponsors or otherwise, can bring forward amendments. This happens all the time. Typically, it's from issues that were brought up either in committee or after committee, or there was a strategic reason why they weren't brought in committee. But amendments are also very common on second reading. This is also where a lot of filibustering happens. And I'm sure that you all know what filibustering is. But if not, it is a tool that the minority party uses a lot because it's one of the only tools that they have to influence policy and to make sure their constituents know that they're out there, fighting the good fight for them and working as hard as they can for them. Because of the way majority vote works, the majority party kind of most of the time kind of gets what they want. So you'll see a lot of filibustering on the cow at the end of session because again, we have those 120 days. So whatever is not done, finished, signed, sealed, and delivered by that's 120 days, it's dead on the calendar. It's done. Doesn't matter where it was in the process, doesn't matter if it was actually voted to die. So you'll see a lot of filibustering on the cow, a lot of long debate towards the end of session because they're trying to mess up the calendar enough to push bills out and get a bunch of bills to die on the calendar.
And these are known as floor votes, right?
I'm sorry?
These are floor votes?
Yes, yeah, this is all after committee. This is all now on the floor. The second reading is a voice vote, so it's not an actual recorded, representative so and so votes yes. It is a voice vote. So typically it's what the sponsor wants, things like that. Sometimes, and I would say it is this happens regularly, but is not the norm. A division can be called on amendments that are maybe controversial or they're close or, lots of different reasons I won't get into, but sometimes a division can be called on an amendment or the bill itself. And what that means is that all members have to go into the chamber. The sergeant at arms will come out and they'll yell as loud as they can and throughout the entire Capitol, division, division. It scares everybody the first couple times they hear it. And they'll go into the floor and they require everyone to sit down and they will actually record a vote. Stand if you vote yes, stand if you vote no. And sometimes very controversial amendments get onto bills that way. We saw that a couple times this last year as well. Okay, so once again, if a bill dies on second reading, it's done, except for one exception that I'm going to talk about really quick just because I think it's interesting. But if it passed, then you're moving on. Really quick, there's something called the cow report that has to be accepted. And the cow report basically is just a list of all the bills that they voted on that said this bill passed, this bill died. What can happen, and we have seen happen before, is so members can debate on the cow report and members can bring amendments to the cow report. So I'm going to use an example that we saw a couple years ago. This is the first time I'd ever seen this. A bill was brought forward in second reading. It only passed out of committee because a very substantial amendment was added on to the bill in committee. During the committee of the whole, that amendment was ripped off the bill and things got flustered, people were out of the room, and the bill passed even though the deal was to keep this amendment on. So the bill passed after it had ripped the amendment off on the cow. And once people had realized that, an amendment was brought forward to the committee of the whole report saying that the bill actually died. Therefore, because the committee of the whole report reflected that the bill actually died, the bill did die, even though it technically passed the committee of the whole second reading. I know that was really complicated, but That's probably the only like crazy wackadoo situation that I'll share, but that's an example of what this can look like and why it's really important to pay very close attention no matter what happens, because there are definitely ways to loophole things. Even so you can pass something and then pass a report that said, nope, that thing actually died, and then it dies. So very interesting. But hopefully that doesn't happen and you can move on to third reading and final passage. Okay, we're in the home stretch, everybody. So third reading and final passage is just the final kind of wrapping up vote. Third reading amendments are not very common. In fact, in order to present a third reading amendment, members actually have to ask for permission to present a third reading amendment, and the members have to vote. It has to be majority vote that a member can present a third reading amendment. It's usually like a tisk thing, and they really can only be technical fixes. They can't really be substantive because it's gone through this whole process. It's kind of looked down upon to bring forward a substantive amendment in the third reading. So typically it doesn't really happen unless it's a very tiny fix. This is when there is a full counted display board vote. So members have little vote buttons on their desk. They're green for yes, red for no, and they click their vote and it shows up on a giant display board in the House. And it counts all of their votes, and the bill passes or dies based on that vote. It's usually, a pretty quick process. And after that, they will ask for co-sponsors. So if the bill, whatever happens, they'll open the board up again, ask for a co-sponsor, and people will press a button, the yes button, if they'd like to be added to the co-sponsor list. If the bill dies on third reading, even though you made it that far, guess what? It's dead for the session. I know that's such a surprise for everybody, but it's dead. If it passes third reading, so hypothetically we started in the House, guess what? The whole process starts all over again in the second chamber, down to we have to wait for the bill to be introduced again in the second chamber. So if we started in the House, we made it all the way through committee, through second reading, through third reading, the bill has to go to the second chamber, be introduced, be assigned to committee, and it has to do every single step completely all over again. And it can be completely different. So we've had bills that passed almost unanimously in one chamber and they die in the first committee in the second chamber. You really don't know. It can be, you can make it all the way through the second chamber and it die on the last step. And then if in the second chamber they add any amendments in committee in second reading, if they add any amendments, that needs to go, then the final bill with the amendments needs to go back over to the original chamber for them to concur with the amendments. If they don't concur, that bill goes to what's called a conference committee that determines essentially whether or not the bill is going to keep those amendments, and the sponsors decide that. So the original chamber sponsors decide, hey, we agree with these amendments, or no, we disagree with these amendments. We'd like to go to conference committee. Should everyone agree, all amendments are good, it's passed third reading in the second chamber, your bill is on its way to the governor's office. And this is a pretty straightforward process. The governor will either sign or veto. The governor during session has 10 days to veto a bill. And then this is also another interesting thing. We have no pocket veto. So if you've heard, a governor can just sit on a bill, not sign it, and it dies, then we do not have that here. The governor can sit on a bill and not sign it technically, and it will still go into law. So it can pass without any signature. There's no pocket veto here. But we can go back, if the governor vetoes, we can go back and override the veto with a 2/3 vote, both chambers. And it has been done, it can be done, but they're usually pretty strategic about how they time vetoes and bills to make that not really work. So anyway, we always say it takes about 3 years to get a really substantive bill all the way through the process. As you can see, it's tough. And that was really just the tip of the iceberg, you guys. So yeah, that's kind of what it takes. So I'm gonna pass it over to Lacey to kind of go through an example of what that looks like. I hope everybody is still awake. We have a little we have a little bit more to go.
Bailey, is there such thing as a resolution as opposed to a bill?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. There are resolutions, there are memorials, there are several different things that are put forward. And they all, some of them have different processes, some of them have the same. But for the most part, you're gonna see bills. But yeah, there are like House joint resolutions and things like that.
Well, thank you, Bailey. As she was describing all of that, I was thinking of even more scenarios that we just can't get into because there are that many. I think Bailey told you half of it. So you did a very good job. This visual is kind of everything that Bailey described. They actually offer this on the General Assembly website. So that's where we got this, and they've updated it a little bit in years. But this is kind of a handy tool if you all feel free to use it. Again, it's on the General Assembly site. So we wanted to talk specifically about the PUC sunset bill, which was 1326 this year. That bill went through this whole process. I just checked a few minutes ago, and the governor has still not signed it. It is the Public Utilities Commission. It is an essential entity. It is not like he is going to veto the sunset bill. So just don't panic about that right now. He has 30 days after the last day of the legislative session to sign or veto policy. During the legislative session, he has 10 days. So when Bailey was talking about vetoes and timing, if there is a possibility for an override, you really want to get your bill through 11 days before the session ends in order to override it. So the PUC sunset was in all fairness, came out as a pretty big compromise. I don't think anybody in the environmental community thinks that we got everything that we wanted. And industry certainly didn't get everything that they wanted. They were pushing for, geographic representation since the beginning of the sunset process, right? They didn't get that. They are going to kind of review the seats at the PUC in rule and with public testimony, but that's something that was seen as a compromise in that bill. This policy was amended, I think, every step of the way, except for on third reading in the House. It was amended on third reading in the Senate. So going back to Bailey discussing how usually substantive amendments are not brought on third reading, this was one of those exceptions. So as much as we say these are the steps and this is how it goes, there are always exceptions to the process. So third reading in the Senate, I can't remember specifically what it was, but there was another amendment that was brought to try to change the PUC sunset. Lauren, you had your hand up. I don't want to.
Yeah, I thought I would just give people a little bit of framing of what this bill is about. It's a great way to illustrate the process, and I want to get back to that. But just so you all feel that you have some skin in the game, this is a bill that reauthorizes our Public Utilities Commission. Our Public Utilities Commission is responsible for making decisions on some very key things that we're all familiar with, like our utility rates. How much do we pay for gas? How much do we pay for electricity? That's just the beginning of what they rule on, but it's a very important component of what they rule on. And there is a rate case for gas and electricity underway now. So you can imagine that when certain interest groups, such as the utilities themselves, the regulated entities, and others, I call them sometimes the corporate aligned trades, CATs for short, people who feel that their jobs are tethered very strongly to the utility work or the future of utility profits. They are invested and they will they're pushing for certain changes. And some of those changes include adding commissioners, making those commissioners based on the geography of the state instead of where the greatest population is or where Excel, our largest utility, is serving the greatest number of people. And so you can see where these types of dynamics could lead to outcomes that aren't necessarily most beneficial for the most people. And that includes pollution that can result from power generation or from gas distribution or safety issues around either of those. And that's why we're so concerned about this bill. And yes, we had some wins for equity, we had some wins for consumers, and we had some losses to the other side. Now we have to study their proposals in a formal way and give them more weight than we'd all prefer. So go ahead, Lacey, please.
Oh no. Just so you all are aware, Lauren and I are tag teaming the next few slides. It gives you different perspectives. Bailey and I are entrenched in the process, and whatever Lauren and team tells us they want, we are just their mouthpieces. And so sometimes I forget the intricacies of the policies, especially since I've checked out since session has ended because it is mentally tasking. But it also is for representatives like Lauren that are working on the inside and with other community partners. So,
yeah, and Rachel's been a great partner to all of us as well. And there's one bill that, at least one bill that she'll weigh in on at least. And feel free to let us know any further insights you'd like to share as well, Rachel, as we move forward. But
Well, I
go
just really want to thank Bailey and Lacey for breaking this down, because I think from the outside, we ask folks to either come in and testify or, virtually or in person or write a letter. That is such a small piece of making it bill to law. And so just we when we ask you to weigh in, we are asking you to weigh in all of these little steps. So it might be like, well, heck, I already said so. I already testified. I wrote a letter. I have a t-shirt. What the heck else, right? What else do I need to do? There are so many steps where you can actually have the opportunity to weigh in. And so we want to continue to stay front of mind for a lot of these legislators and say, please continue to do the right thing, because you never know when they're going to get pulled in another direction. So we got to just, have all kinds of dances and moves and everything else to keep them in our step, So
that's right. That's right. And it was Rachel's idea to hold this sausage making session indeed, in addition to the actual recap of the bills. And I thought it was a great idea. So that's why we're here. Thank you for that, Rachel. And it does what we're doing here explains why you might get 2 or 3 emails from me saying, hey, let's stop this bill, or hey, let's pass this bill. And you're like, didn't I get an email from her just like a week ago saying we had to do that? And I sent a message, and why is she bugging me again? Because it's a whole new group of people, and I will redesign those alerts to go after the next and the next and the next committee. If I have time, I will empower our followers to send messages not only to the committee of reference in one chamber, but the other chamber, and even appropriations, if I think it will help us get the healthiest energy policy that we're trying to get. Thank you, Lacey. Let's keep going.
next slide, Bailey, please. Okay, so we're going to go through some of the higher profile bills that we saw this year. And of course, we need to start with data centers. Super disappointing, nothing happened this year. Felt really bad for Senator Kathy Kipp of Fort Collins, who was working on her bill, which was Senate Bill 102, since May of last year. And it included a lot of the regulations that we needed as environmental communities. And she was going to even beef them up further after her bill was introduced. Unfortunately, because also House Bill 261030 was introduced, which was the data center industry driven bill, which was full of their desired incentives and almost no regulation. The dueling bill issue happened. And we've seen this with other controversial policies in the past. When there are two bills with the same topic, leadership almost demands of those bill sponsors to come to the table with one compromise. But here's what happened. The environmental community wanted 102 to be the vehicle for this compromise. The data center community wanted 1030 to be the vehicle for the compromise, and nobody compromised. Now, that's a great thing in some ways because we're not going to bend on, these mega polluters destroying, frankly, rural communities in our state, gobbling up all of the water for Meta and Jeffrey Bezos and all of those people to make more money, right? I think we're all on the same page there. What's lucky about our state is we don't have one of these massive large load data centers yet. And other states have already put them in. And because of the issues that they're having, we now get to learn from their mistakes and say, look, these are we must have these regulations. It's a hard stop that has to happen. What happened with 102 was, as you can see, it was introduced in early February. It had its full hearing in the Senate Transportation and Energy Committee in mid-March, and then it was laid over for action and amendments. So our communities and industry got to come and testify on that bill. And as they tried to negotiate after that hearing, then it had its final hearing on May 11th, where Senator Kipp just had to postpone the bill indefinitely. She did, however, come up with a strike below amendment. What that means is the entire bill was ripped away and a whole new bill was written in amendment form that was going to be brought in committee. I know that Lauren and Rachel and other individuals had seen this amendment over the weekend prior to the hearing, and that there were many meetings and a lot of disagreements because that amendment did include some incentives for just a handful of data centers. And Lauren can kind of give more detail about that, but that still wasn't enough to get the bill past that particular committee. And I will say 1030 was never going to pass no matter what Representative Valdez did, because all of your work, emailing, calling, all of the community partners and all of their lobbyists kind of keeping their thumb on the committee of reference was never going to change anything about that bill. So that's why it didn't actually even have a full hearing on the 7th of May. The sponsor came to committee and just said, I'm postponing this indefinitely. He had a terrible attitude and his bill died. So Lauren, if you wanted to elaborate, or Rachel on
Sure.
the data stuff.
Sure. Well, because of the difficulty in passing 102 and the need that was felt for a strike below, the strike below had some things that would have strengthened the bill. So there were some improvements, but the major category of compromise was the incentives, and it was a limited incentive. But a lot of us don't believe. Well, personally, I feel that we dodged a bullet because most states that have, first of all, it seems that most states, many states have passed incentives, and many states are engaged in fights over data centers to the tune of 360,000 people nationwide fighting data centers, as compiled by a group in North Carolina. This is not just North Carolina. 360 Americans nationwide are fighting data centers. 360,000. I feel that we dodged a bullet because we have another year to learn from their mistakes. And 102 can be stronger. And maybe some of us will come together and find ways to limit the number of data centers. Not just limit the impacts of data centers, but limit the number, either through making the process difficult enough or other methods, whatever they may be. it is these data centers detract from our ability to reduce GHG emissions, and therefore they accelerate climate change, the climate crisis that is causing fires and drought and floods and ocean rise and the melting of the sea ice and everything that we know. They're an anti-climate proposal as they stand right now. Hyperscale data centers are an anti-climate proposal. And if you're a pro-climate, you cannot be pro-hyperscale data centers in the way that they manifest themselves right now. You just can't do it, even if they are 100% renewable. But 102 was really a great bill. Um, it didn't have any incentives. The current version, the unamended version, and the amendment was never passed. So this is the version that we have. It's not a bad bill, and I would back it up again. And I think it should be improved and strengthened. And now we have the chance to do that and do that together as we build our movement and build our coalition and learn from what other states are going through. So there may be data centers that are unregulated, but without the incentives, they're not as likely to come here. And I think that's a plus. So those are my thoughts on that at the moment. As much as I liked the bill and supported the bill, as grateful as we are to Senator Kipp and Representative Brown for bringing this very important bill, we will support them. We will work with them. And our movement is growing daily because the impacts of data centers on water, on our air quality, on our climate, on our communities, on our way of life are just completely anti-climate, anti-human, anti-health, anti-everything. Now, maybe they could improve. Maybe they could become more efficient. Maybe they can be built underground. But right now, they ain't working for most people, or the environment that we depend on. So that's my little speech about that. And I'll be in touch with all of you to grow this movement and increase our ability to resist so that we can all have a healthier, stronger, better life. And that's good for workers too. That's good for jobs. It's good for our economy as well as our health.
Okay, Bailey, next slide.
I want to comment. Tom had something in the chat about sharing this with legislators and pushing back. I think that the biggest question, we all just need to be really information sharing right now, because the biggest question is, what are they for and why so many all of a sudden? Those questions aren't getting answered. And I think the more we can educate ourselves and educate each other and just just be one group mind around this and be understanding what's happened. This is a large reshaping of our economy and our society in ways that we haven't seen before. And so we really have to wrap our heads around it before we actually go into these things. And they're just being rushed, and they're being rushed in a very secretive way. And so that to me just is red flags are just going off left and right. So we really do need to, I love this opportunity to be able to share this with you, but just start talking about it with your neighbors. Like, what do you think about data centers? And just start those conversations, because we're all going to have to deal with this eventually.
Thank you, Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about your work on SB 045, nuclear workforce development and education?
Sure.
And then Lacey can describe the process by which we again dodged the bullet on a bill that could have been very harmful to a lot of us.
Sure. So this is near and dear to my heart. I am a former professor of sociology and women's studies through the Community College of Denver. I taught for over 20 years. And so I have a real high level understanding about what is needed in colleges and universities. And this kind of a program is not something that the colleges and universities need. They need, so many other things. They need to be able to pay their faculty more money. They need to be able to lower tuition. Every year tuition goes up. So this is just one of those things. It's like, why are we spending money here? Also, I was really shocked. I was the only person who showed up to testify against it. There were lots of people cheering about, oh, this is so is great. My kid goes to the School of the Mines, which is one of the people that or one of the entities that are mentioned in the bill. And I was kind of just taken aback, but I was mostly taken aback because I was the only one. I got a lot of questions. I was mostly taken aback because our legislators don't have very much information about nuclear power. And they don't have very much information about its harms. And I think that we have kind of just basically blacked out a good chunk of our history of nuclear energy and what's happened. And they're marketing this new nuclear. Like there's a whole other evolution of it. And this program, the Nuclear Workforce Development Education Program, would be just basically training people to work in nuclear facilities. We are easily 10 plus years out because nuclear power, even if they're small nuclear modulators, they take a long time to build. They're very expensive. So this is just kind of like, why are we doing this right now? And these are the kind of ideas, like nuclear has been popping up in legislation over the last almost 10 years here and there. So they just keep trying to make it, move the goalposts a little bit more so that we become more used to this idea of nuclear. But it's still not, we're not there yet. We have other things to worry about and think about. Not to mention the fact that it's been rephrased to, it's considered clean now because it doesn't emit. And that's like,
It doesn't emit GHGs.
right.
It doesn't emit carbon, but it emits radionuclide particles. And
Yep.
we're not counting those yet, apparently, but we will. If we have anything to say about it, we absolutely will. So thank you, Rachel, for talking to this committee and sharing your perspective as a professor about how, for one thing, we don't want to create a workforce if we're not going to have jobs for them. And one of the reasons that's been given to have nuclear power restart in Colorado is for jobs for former workers in coal plants. And so if they need those jobs, why would we create a new workforce to compete with them? That makes no sense whatsoever. So this would have been $500,000 potentially going to this program from a negative $1.5 billion budget that Colorado is experiencing right now. So, and we'll go till about 6:15, 6:20, and then we'll take some questions at the end. So, Lacey, do you want to talk about, can you run us through what happened with SB 26045?
Yeah, I can make this quick too. So, like Rachel indicated, no one was against this bill, and it was bipartisan, and so it rolled through the Senate. I think it had like 2 no votes when it came out of the full Senate. No one was stopping it, but what happened is it started to slow down in the House, and the controversy was 1337, which was I don't know. I don't like to compare the 2 bills because they're both harmful, but 1337 created this entire new office in the Colorado Energy Office. It was the Advanced Nuclear Energy and Technical Assistance Office, which would have allowed permitting for nuclear facilities, and it directed money for the larger utilities to start developing these projects. So
At
that was
ratepayer expense,
right at
$20 million.
ratepayer expense, yes.
Yes.
So what happened was, in order for Excel basically and some of the data or the nuclear energy lobbyists to get it through committee, they had to run this huge amendment that would drastically reduce their like initial $1 million fiscal note. And that amendment passed and the bill passed out of the House Energy Committee. But it had to go to appropriations. And while we were waiting for that appropriations, it did drastically reduce it, but there was still a fiscal note. And as Lauren just indicated, we have a $1.5 billion deficit. There's not a lot of money being spent on new things. We, as PSR's lobbyist, requested Representative Kyle Brown, who was the chairman of appropriations, to hold the bill. He is anti-nuclear energy, and he said, yeah, I'll do that. So this is one of those times where the bill will just disappear after going through its first committee because it will not get calendared for its second. Now we had to keep following up with Representative Brown. We contacted Lauren and Rachel to get some of those the emails coming to the Appropriations Committee in case he got too much pressure and felt like he had to calendar the bill. At least we could kill it on the votes, which we could also do. So we had Plan A and Plan B. But here's what was happening. Bailey and I've been doing this for 14 years. And so I just saw like the Excel team like moving around all weird one day. And I saw what they were talking to. And what they were trying to do was they were trying to put language from 1337, knowing it was never going to see the light of day again, into Senate Bill 45. And we reached out to the environmental lobbyists and we said, hey, this looks suspicious. Can someone, reach out to Representative Pascal, who is the Democratic sponsor of Senate Bill 45? And then I reached back out to Kyle Brown and the other representatives on the Appropriations Committee and said, hey, you need to kill Senate Bill 45 if it's going to be amended at all. And some of them in the final days didn't really read my text and just read vote no on 45. And so that's how we killed Senate Bill 45. It just happened. So Excel did themselves dirty. They were trying to get something done, and unfortunately that bit them in the behind. But that sometimes we get lucky like that. Now, this issue is not going anywhere. Rachel kind of indicated there's a lot happening, and the way that they're selling it is totally different, and there are a lot of Democrats that are supporting it. If we look at our House Energy Committee, a lot of our allies are there, and it passed out of that committee. So we'll have to be on the lookout next year. It's definitely coming back.
Yeah, and I do want to weigh in on that I've put a link in the chat to learn about and register for our upcoming High Cost of Nuclear Power webinar on June 1st. And this high cost is to our pocketbooks and to our health. And that's why Excel likes it. I don't really think Excel cares about whether we have nuclear or not, but they want to spend our money building nuclear. It's very, it's just more when they spend money on infrastructure, they get a guaranteed rate of profit. And so they like to build things. They like to build pipelines. They like to build infrastructure. These are things that are attractive to their investors, to the banks, and to the utility itself. It builds their profits and their assets like nothing else seems to, unfortunately, and we need to work on the perverse incentives for utilities in this state. And other states have started to have performance-based revenue for utilities, and that's something we can consider and look into. But for now, they're strongly incentivized to build a lot of stuff on our dime. And there's nothing like building a big, expensive new nuclear power plant to suck dimes out of ratepayers, consumers' pockets. It has pretty much no equal. I just wanted to share, please do join us for this webinar. And we are launching, we'll be having more webinars that are based on Colorado's nuclear relapse, as some have coined it, which I really do like the term. So we'll be in touch with you about those opportunities. But the first event of our new nuclear-free campaign, nuclear costs and hazards awareness campaign, is this June 1st webinar. And if you can't make it, sign up anyway. We'll make sure to get you a recording, and we'll be following up on that. So yeah, let's go on.
Yep. Next slide, Bailey. Thank you. I'll whip through this. This is the second year that we brought back on-bill financing. It died again, but Senator Gonzalez is not the one who killed it. We actually got her to support the bill. Again, thank you through your emails and constituent outreach. Really did help. Rachel and Lauren helped coordinate that. That was fantastic. There were some amendments in appropriations that got her to a yes as well, but unfortunately, our future treasurer, Jeff Bridges, who is a senator, voted no, and Chris Kolker voted no. Both did not like the use of the unclaimed property funds. And then Senator Bridges thinks when he's treasurer, he's just going to be able to wave his magic wand and fix this himself. So, you heard that from my lips to your ears. Please reach out to him when he's in that position to get that done, since he killed it. So, can we move on to that last
Yes.
set of bills? Okay, that was really quick. Sorry, everyone. This one was really interesting. So the Nixon coal plant in Colorado Springs has decided that they didn't need to put a plan together for their clean energy to, have renewable energy up to 80% and reduce coal use.
As
So
required by Colorado law. Now, I just want to make sure everybody knows that Colorado is heading towards 80% renewable energy or clean energy, but nuclear power cannot happen fast enough. Our deadline for 80% renewable energy is 2030, and
Yep.
that's on the books already.
Yes, that passed, I think, in 22 or 21. It was earlier in this decade, so it gave these, utilities almost a decade to figure that out. And for some reason, CSU thinks it's very special. And they went to the legislature to ask for like extra time. So Senate Bill 22 was the first controversial piece of this. It was never going to pass out of its original committee. So what happened was some of our environmental partners came to the table with this municipal utility and worked out a deal. It took forever. As you can see, 22 was introduced on the first day of the legislative session. It was postponed indefinitely on the 29th of April. So for 4 months-ish, they were negotiating. And what they had to do was get a late bill and bring a brand new bill, and that was Senate Bill 182. Now, Senate Bill 182 was introduced the day before 22 died and just was rammed through the process. It did provide a bit more than the clean energy plan required of these utilities, but it also gave a very specific one-time extension for CSU, which was by 2032, they have to have this reduction in place. And they have to have a plan within the next year presented to, I believe, the legislature, but don't quote me on that. They have to have a plan, which they didn't have a plan. So that's a great step. This was a weird scenario. I've not seen, not a lot of legislation is specifically for one entity. We can always say like Excel is going to benefit off of this, but there are other utilities that will also benefit, right? But this bill was specific to one utility in Colorado Springs. And I think with the effort of everybody on board, although we did grant an extension to a coal plant, something good was done. Because they could have easily come back in a following year and just said, we want to have an extension till 2040. And that would be terrible. So. And if Lauren or Rachel, if you wanted to piggyback anything off of that particular issue or just open it up for questions, you tell me.
I think we can open up for questions. Thank you. I just want to express my appreciation to Rachel and Lacey and Bailey for being here and for all that you've contributed to all the hard work you put into this session and taking extra time to be here tonight to share your insights into the process, which is so important for us all to understand as much of as we possibly can. And I see we have one of our fellow PSR folks raising a hand. Are you able to come off of mute and turn on your camera? Would you like to ask us a question?
I have video now. Is that
Yes.
me you were addressing, Lauren?
If you were raising your hand, that's who I was
Yes.
addressing.
Yes. One of the questions I have is when you say that the bill dies, is that when it comes, if it's going to be reborn the next session, how does it have to be substantially different? Or can it just be a tweak of the last session?
So typically, you've learned your lesson once, right? like life lessons. And you know how to approach something a little bit differently. So we do that with our policies as well. If you in dip, this is where this gets complicated. So this is a great question. This is an election year. We have a brand new governor next
Yes.
year. This is probably the one and only time where you could be like, "Hey, I'm going to introduce the same bill again and see how it goes." Because the makeup's going to be different. There will be new House representatives, new senators.
Right.
Yes. So this time, yes, but typically you already have an idea of who is going to be in leadership, and if those powers that be who are very powerful disliked your policy as it was, typically you come with something a little bit different,
Mhm.
and slightly more compromise. But you don't always want to, throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? You're not going to just come in with some watered down version of what you would have liked to see. You usually come in pretty strong and then go through the process and change it that way through amendments.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you, Barbara. Who else has some questions for us? Anyone? I see some familiar names in our among our attendees here. Anyone else? Well, I just want to say give big credit to everyone again who was on the panel, and to Barbara for serving on our board, and the opportunity, and all board members and supporters for the opportunity to serve this cause in this position, and with Rachel by my side, often hand holding, because it's not uncommon for me to say, Rachel, do you believe what just happened? Do you believe it? Ah! And she's so kind. She's like, yeah, I believe it. Okay, what do we do next? Let's figure it out. So thank you. And thanks, Tom Lundy, Joan Seaman, Amy Sherwood, Scott Hatfield, for being in our audience, and for all the work that you have done on these issues throughout the years. I know that you're you're a very important part of our work and the collective work to protect our health and our climate and our environment from pollution and carbon carbon pollution, hazardous air pollutants, etc. So look forward to standing with you and fighting again in the coming months and throughout the next session. And please be in touch with me, and I'll certainly be in touch with you to arm you with the information you need to optimize your advocacy. Thanks, everyone. Good night.